Hello, thanks for watching. In this video, I'm creating 3 cards with unique edges featuring the flowers that I made using the Paper Posy die set in a previous video. And I'll link that above if you want to see how I made those flowers. So for my first card, I am going to start with a piece of cardstock that is 8.5 by 5.5, and I'm going to score it down the middle at 4 1/4 like you would for any note card. Then I'm going to open it up and I'm going to take a ruler and I'm going to mark the center point of that front panel or one of the panels. And that is going to be at 2 1/8. So I'm just going to make a bunch of marks here so that I can eventually draw a line down the middle of that card panel. And then I'm going to take a shape. In this case, I'm using this hexagon that's a little bit bigger than my die cut flower. So you can see the die cut flower there, and I've picked a shape that is a little bit bigger. I'm going to tape it down and then run it through my die cutting machine doing a partial die cut. So I'm going to line up my die cutting plates right up to that line that I drew. And then once we run that through our die cutting machine, I'm going to remove the shape and the tape so that you'll see that only one side of the panel is cut, and it's going to be the side that is closest to the fold. I'm then going to go ahead and score the drawn line up to that die cut line. So from the top right up until where that hexagon shape starts, and then again at the bottom right from where that hexagon shape starts to the bottom of the card. So it's only going to be partially scored and partially die cut. And so this is going to sort of fold outward, and I'll show you in just a minute how it looks, but I'm going to go ahead and erase my line since we don't want it to be seen on the final card. So then I'm just going to reinforce these folds here, and when it opens up you can see that the hexagon shape is on the one side and it sort of nestles into where it was die cut out of. So it creates sort of that unique edge. And it also stands up pretty nicely. So to finish this card, I'm going to stamp this friend script sentiment background that I have from Simon Says Stamp, and so I'm just like lining that up on the inside and the outside of the card and then just going ahead and stamping that down. I didn't show most of this. Mostly this is just how I'm finishing the card. I wanted to feature the unique folds. I also decided that I'm going to sort of fill out a kind of neat bouquet on this hexagon shape, and so I needed to cut some additional pieces from that Paper Posy bundle. I didn't do a very good job of filming this section, so I'm not really going to show it, but I wanted to show you this little piece of how I'm sort of picking out the different flowers. I've got some yellows and then some greens and teals for leaves. And then I'm going to go ahead and arrange that into a bouquet and glue all those pieces down. So this is sort of what it looks like when I have finished my bouquet and that background. And now I'm going to create a space where I can write my sentiment on the inside. So I have a die cut hexagon that is the same size as the die cut that we partially die cut from the beginning. And I'm going to line this up on the card so that when it's closed, it's hidden, and then when you open it, you can see where the shape is. I'm going to add a sentiment on the inside that I think is just really cute. It says, "Friends are like flowers, they bring color to your life," and I feel like it suited this card pretty well, especially with the friendship sentiment sort of background that we have. So this is the finished card. Some of the leaves hang over on that die cut edge, but for the most part, the bouquet is contained within the hexagon shape. And then for my second card, I'm going to start with a 4 1/4 by 11 piece of cardstock. And I'm not going to score this just yet. I'm going to start by identifying the center of the card. So that's going to be at 5.5 So I'm just going to mark those, create some marks with my pencil, and then I'm going to draw a line down the center. But I'm not going to score it just yet. For this example, I'm also going to use a shape die cut. I'm going to go with a circle this time. So I did my best to sort of center that around the line, and now I'm taping it into place. For this card as well, I'm going to be doing some partial die cutting. And so I'm going to line up my plates right up to the line that I drew, that is right down the center of the card. So after running that through my die cut machine, you'll see that we have one half circle cut out, and then the other side is not cut out. I'm going to take this to my scoreboard, and much like the hexagon, I'm going to score on that drawn line up from the top of the card down to the die cut, the start of the die cut, and then again from the bottom up to the edge of the die cut. So the score lines will only be outside where that die cut shape is. And then what I'm going to do is, since this actually makes a card that's bigger than 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, I'm going to trim off the excess so that it is, with that die cut sort of half circle hanging off, it equals 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and it will fit in a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch envelope. So for this card, I am creating a background with these little tiny flowers that are from a different die set. It's from the Primrose Garden die set. And I just cut a bunch of them out of lilac cardstock, and then I cut this Hello die cut sentiment and layered a bunch of pieces together. And I'm using these tiny flowers to create a background that I've sort of haphazardly placed all of these flowers. So I didn't show most of this, so I'm just going to show sort of the tail end of it, and then show the finished card. I'm going to trim off all the excess of the lilac flowers so that they're not overhanging. And then in the center of that circle is the main flower, where the main flower is going to go. So what's cool about this card is that once it's open, you can still see the die cut flower on this in the inside. It also stands up really well. And then on the inside, I added a sentiment, "Have a beautiful day." On my last card, I am scoring a card base that's going to be 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm using this A2 curve that I have in my stash to create a die cut edge of the card. So I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine, and it's going to cut through both layers of cardstock. So like I said, that cuts through both sides, and I didn't quite cut the top there, so I'm just going to use my scissors to finish it off. And so this sort of creates a shaped card. This actually card does not stand up on its own. I cut the half, sort of the curve too close, so it doesn't really stand up. So I'm going to show you how I fix that so that it can still stand up. For the background, I use this turnabout stamp, this geometric triangles, just to create a cool little unique background. So to make sure that it stands up, what I'm doing is I am gluing one of the flowers on the edge of the card in a position where it allows it to give it sort of like a tripod. It gives it a third position to sort of allow it to distribute the weight and stand up. Since this does have an overlapping, I'm using a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch cardstock just to make sure I don't go over the edge too much, and that it still fits in a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch envelope. So I am just adding the last few bits, again using that card panel behind to make sure I don't go over too far off of the edge, make sure it still fits into that envelope. So I added a sentiment that says "Happy Autumn," and this is the final card. So pretty cool background with some beautiful flowers on the front, that nice interesting curve on the inside, but again it still stands up because we got that one flower kind of creating like a tripod shape for it, and it still fits nicely in a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch envelope. And that's the last and final card. Thanks for watching. I've linked both the paper posy card video as well as the other card video that I used where I used the paper posy flowers.